One, we've been talking a lot about, the quality of third-party service providers, especially nowadays, to kind of successfully get a project from its origination all the way through, repayment and I-29 approval. One of the third-party service providers that has been very prevalent in the business for a very long time is Economists. It's EB5 is a job creation program, and how that job creation gets calculated has evolved over time as well. I mean, I remember the days when you were actually putting in employee names with I-9 forms and the number of hours worked at some point, which was a very onerous process. But USS, to its credit, has kind of evolved and embraced kind of economic models to meet job creation requirements. But there are different models out there. And there is, I will say at this point, the economists that are in EB5 are very knowledgeable about the program because it's a very specialized kind of niche service that they provide. But they also overlap a lot with business writers and everything else. This is something that a lot of regional centers, pre-RIA as well, made use of. Would love to hear what your individual strategies have been in terms of the economists using them, whether you use someone third party. Is there a particular economic model that you gravitate towards for certain reasons, and whether or not you use a business writer or at this point are doing these things in-house?
So this is something where I think, CMD is a little bit different. We've been doing this for a really long time. We've done over 90 different EB5 partnerships. And so there's a volume component here as well. But when it comes to economists and business plans, we do all of that in-house. So when you talk about the economist, we actually have a team of 3 different economists. Our chief economist has actually been with CMB for 13 years. He understands, EB5, he's lived it, he's breathes it. And then we just hired recently a former USCIS supervising economist that was overseeing a team that adjudicates 956Fs. And so that's been a nice overlay for our econ team. So I'm probably question, we have 3 different, economists in house. How is there that much work for economists? But when you think about the slew of projects that come our way, right, whether they're high unemployment or rural, checking for qualifications, obviously for the jobs reports, but then, we also use our economists throughout the project life cycle because, they understand the construction timeline, they understand how timely the information has to be, and they're able to compile the information as the project is spending money. And so qualified expenditures, job creation, which is really important for our 829 submissions. And so they're essentially doing 829 gathering real time as the project is undergoing the construction and the qualified spend. And then again, same thing with our business plan. We have our project team, our senior vice president, Matt, has been with the company for over 13 years. And so, he's been writing business plans for us, and he understands the nuances of, not just, business plan being matter of whole right compliant, but then also all of the additional inputs that we get from the adjudications that we have seen over time. And I feel like it allows us to be nimble. It allows us to pivot quickly. And so it's worked for us. There's times that we'll supplement if there's a nuanced area, for example, we actually had a nuance with a rural deal that we did that we wanted a third party to opine on. And so we added that. And so we'll add on additional expertise when we need it. But generally, we do everything in-house.
Dan, Sebastian, I think you probably come from slightly smaller shops. Would be interested in hearing how you kind of approached your strategies for working with economists directly, working with business writers with respect to your 956F filings.
Yeah, it's funny when Noreen says that question, how do you have enough work for economists? I think I've asked her that question before. And her answers have always been fantastic, and I'm a little jealous she has someone she can go talk to at any point. But, when we first started, again, as you guys know, there wasn't a developed market of economists out there that understood EB5 or how to do business plans. There weren't business plan writers. So we did do it all internally. Over time, as that market matured and people found that, hey, there is a need for us out there. Economists that have learned EB5 have done a fantastic job. So, we partner with some specific ones that we've used throughout the years now. They do a great job, and they're pretty responsive as well. So when you need updates, when you need some numbers crunched, there's still some things you can do internally if you understand it, even if you don't have an economist in-house. But from picking what methodology to use, again, we used to do that ourselves. Now, we lean on the economist for this. And it's the same with the business plan. We put together most of the components, right? We're providing the information. We have access to that. We have a third party do it now. And again, they're monitoring the current trends, what USCIS is looking for. And we found that to be an effective tool as we kind of migrate from doing it in-house to doing that they've done a great job. So especially for somebody starting out, we've been talking about that a lot. Probably going Noreen's route is probably a barrier for them, whereas going our route is something that anybody can do. There's just a cost to it, right? Every business plan, every economist has a cost. And that's just something, when Sebastian talked earlier about the expenses in EB5, it's just another thing you got to put on that list that you're going to have to pay for.
Absolutely. I think, you raise a really important point that what you're paying for is also kind of the range of projects and strategies that they're seeing beyond your own regional centers projects, that they can kind of bring in that insight in. We don't get the tunnel vision that sometimes you can get by just focusing on your own projects and not seeing the diversity of different structures and deals out there. Sebastian, do you have any additional thoughts on the positives and negatives over time of using economists, business writers, doing it internally?
Yeah, I mean, we fall more in FPP's camp on this. We share Dan's jealousy when it comes to certain things that Noreen has at her fingertips. But I will say, I mean, when it comes to business plans, we do a lot of the writing simply because our deals are often industrial in nature. They're very specific to a particular industry that business writers who are more generic, perhaps in their expertise, may not be familiar with. But then we do rely on them when it comes to filling in the pertinent holes that are specific to USCIS requirements and so forth. And we do work entirely externally with our economist. We work with an excellent economist, very well known in the space, used to be inside the USCIS, and she is, she's conservative, she's very experienced, and she does an awesome job in terms of putting it all together. And again, that's upfront, that's ongoing, and then that's at the 829 phase as well, of course. And then immigration counsel as well. So we do rely on a trifecta of external parties, but with our internal support.
Yeah, as do we. I mean, we do a lot in-house only because as Dan mentioned, when we started out, there weren't a lot of third-party service providers of any sort in EB5. But it's actually been kind of a welcome addition to have so many specialists and experts in these spaces, and to have some competition among them, to be perfectly honest. It means that you get a better sense of what the best service providers in that space are. There are definitely fits for different regional centers and operators, but you're not beholden to the one individual firm that did the business, 20 years ago or whatever it was.
And again, I mean, the industry is shifting, right? So the writers have to shift, or the writers have to adjust or expand their knowledge, because 15 years ago it was 99% real estate.
Yes.
Now there's groups doing rural hospitals, drug treatment centers, data storage centers, power facilities, refineries, steel plants, whatever you have, and writing a business plan is not just kind of copying and pasting. You actually have to understand the business to a certain degree, and so that's not necessarily easy. And if you're a business plan writer who's jumping from one to the next very quickly, there's a pretty steep learning curve versus perhaps previously, if you were just kind of describing very similar condo projects over and over, maybe you could kind of benefit from the repetition, but that's not the case anymore. So I do think that at all levels, and the same goes for economists and the same goes for counsel. And so I think the industry as a whole has had to kind of, buckle up and get tighter and get smarter. And I think post RIA world that we live in has, in so many different ways, weeded out lesser players, not just lesser quality players, but players who perhaps didn't have the wherewithal or don't feel like spending the money to do it the right way. And I think from an investor's perspective, that's a wonderful thing. I think it's a safer place than it's ever been before. I think to the extent that there are constituents in Congress that are thinking about whether or not they like the program or not, they should be able to take a lot more comfort in where the program is today versus where it was, both in terms of what it's actually doing for the U.S. economy and the more diverse use of EB5, but also in terms of its safety, and its maturity and its kind of grown upness, if you will.
Absolutely. And I think discussions like these, where we actually share, the reasons why we make the decisions we do in terms of operating long term in this, it only benefits investors understanding all the thoughtfulness that goes into doing this, and it's not just in terms of getting it approved, right? As Noreen, you said, that's a very initial step in a very long process. For those who make it in this program for a long time, you're really thinking long term and how to manage being in this program for a decade or more sometimes. So. Or in our case, I think collectively many decades at this point.